I had been a farmer in the village of Namwon for all my life when news came that Japanese soldiers had landed on our southern shores. This was in the spring of 1592, the year that would forever change our land. My name is Kim Min-jun, and I write this account so that those who come after may understand what befell our people during those 7 years of hell. Before I tell you of the horror, I must tell you of what we were, so you may understand what was lost. Our village of Namwon sat in a valley in Jeolla province, surrounded by mountains that turned gold each autumn. For 15 generations, my family had worked the same rice paddies, planting in spring, harvesting in fall, following the rhythm of seasons that seemed eternal. My wife, Seon-hee, kept our home with hands that could weave cloth as fine as spider silk. My son, Jae-sung, 12 years old, was learning to read the Chinese classics from the village scholar. My daughter, Mi-young, 8 years old, had a laugh that could make the sternest grandfather smile. My own father, too old now to work the fields, spent his days telling stories of the peaceful reign of the Yi Dynasty. The smell of kimchi fermenting in clay pots, the sound of children playing by the stream, the sight of cranes flying overhead each spring. This was our life. This was our world. We thought it would last forever. We were fools. In the 5th month of 1592, everything changed. Refugees began streaming north through our village, their faces masks of terror and disbelief. They spoke of an army unlike anything Korea had ever seen. 158,000 Japanese warriors with arquebuses, guns that could kill from distances our archers could not match. They said the enemy moved like a tsunami, destroying everything in their path. They said Seoul had fallen in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Our capital, gone. We did not believe them. Not truly. How could we? Our village had stood for 300 years in peace. The mountains protected us. The Yi Dynasty protected us. Buddha protected us. We were safe. We had always been safe. But the refugees kept coming, and their stories grew worse. They spoke of something we could not comprehend. They said the Japanese soldiers were cutting off noses, not as punishment, not in rage, but methodically, as proof, as trophies. For every nose delivered to their Lord Hideyoshi in Japan, a soldier received payment and honor. They keep them in barrels, one woman told us, her own face wrapped in blood-soaked cloth where her nose should have been. Barrels of salt, like fish for market. They shipped them across the sea by the thousands. I thought she had gone mad with grief. I thought the trauma of war had broken her mind. I could not imagine such a thing. Who would do this? Why would they do this? What kind of men were these? I would learn the answers. I wish to all my ancestors that I had not. The first sign that reached us directly came in the 3rd week. Smoke on the horizon. The village of Jinju, 10 kilometers south, was burning. We could see the black column rising into the summer sky. That night, more refugees arrived. They had run all day without stopping. They said the Japanese soldiers moved from house to house with wicker baskets. They said the baskets filled quickly. They said the soldiers worked with the efficiency of men doing a simple job, like harvesting rice or catching fish. It's a quota, one man told us, his voice hollow. Each soldier must collect a certain number. If they don't meet their quota, they don't get paid. So they take noses from anyone. Everyone. It doesn't matter if you fight or surrender. It doesn't matter if you're a soldier or a farmer. Man, woman, child, elderly. A nose is a nose. A tally is a tally. The village elders held a meeting. Some said we should flee north immediately. Others said we should stay and defend our homes. Others said we should hide in the mountain caves until the Japanese army passed. My father, the eldest, said we should trust in Buddha and in the righteousness of our cause. Surely heaven would not permit such evil to triumph. We voted to stay. It was the worst decision of our lives. For 5 years, we survived. The Japanese army swept north, and we heard terrible things. but they never came to our valley. We thought we had been spared. We thought the war would end. We thought we were safe. Then, in 1597, Hideyoshi sent a second invasion. 141,000 fresh troops, determined to finish what the first invasion had started. And this time, they came for us. They came at dawn on the 15th day of the 9th month, 1597. We heard them before we saw them, the sound of hundreds of feet on the mountain path, armor clanking, orders shouted in a language that sounded like nothing I had ever heard, harsh, clipped, efficient. I grabbed my son and daughter and ran for the mountains. My wife stayed behind with my father, who could not walk fast enough. His legs were weak, his breath short. She would not leave him. "I'll come back for you," I shouted. She smiled at me. That smile, the last time I ever saw her smile. "Save our children," she said. "That's all that matters now." Those were the last words she ever spoke to me. From the hillside, hidden in the brush, I watched. I wished to all the ancestors that I had not, but I could not look away. My son was beside me, his hand gripping mine so tight it hurt. My daughter's face was pressed against my chest, but she could still hear. We all could hear. The Japanese soldiers moved through our village like farmers harvesting rice. Methodical, efficient, calm. There was no rage in their movements, no fury, no passion. This was simply work to be done, a task to be completed, a quota to be met. They lined up the villagers in the main square. Everyone, men, women, children, the elderly. It did not matter. A samurai commander stood on the raised platform where our village chief usually addressed us during festivals. He wore armor that gleamed in the morning sun. He held a ledger book in one hand, a writing brush in the other. He gave an order, just one sentence in Japanese. His voice was calm, almost bored, and his men drew their tento knives. Short blades they carried at their sides. Sharp, very sharp. What happened next will haunt me until my death and beyond. They did not kill everyone immediately. That would have been a mercy. Instead, they held the villagers down. It took 2 or 3 soldiers per person, one to hold the head, one to hold the arms, one to hold the body, while another used his tanto to cut the noses. They were cutting off noses, the screaming. Oh, Buddha, preserve me, the screaming. It echoed off the mountains, bounced back at us multiplied, became a wall of sound that I can still hear today, 18 years later. My daughter covered her ears and wept silent tears. My son vomited into the grass. I could do nothing but watch, frozen like the coward I was, hidden in the brush while my wife faced hell below. I saw Mr. Park, the scholar who had taught me to read as a child. 3 soldiers held him down. The knife flashed in the sunlight. There was so much blood, more blood than I thought a nose could hold. He was still alive, still conscious, clutching his face, blood pouring between his fingers as the soldier dropped his nose into a wicker basket, a basket already half full. They moved down the line. Old grandmother Choi, who had delivered both my children. Young bride Han, married only 3 months before, still wearing the ceremonial hairpin from her wedding. The blacksmith's twin sons, 14 years old, who had never done harm to anyone. The Buddhist monk who had blessed my marriage and taught me the sutras. One after another, after another, after another. The soldiers worked with the precision of craftsmen. They had done this before, many times before. Their movements were practiced, efficient. No wasted motion. Cut, collect, move on. Cut, collect, move on. Like shearing sheep, like harvesting grain. I watched the commander mark something in his ledger after every 10 noses. He was keeping count, like a merchant counting rice bags at market, like a tax collector tallying payments. 1 nose equals 1 kill, equals 1 reward. That was the system. Lord Hideyoshi had decreed it. Bring proof of your victories. Bring evidence of enemy dead. Bring noses. At first, they had collected ears, but ears were too large, too heavy. You couldn't transport thousands of ears easily. They rotted too quickly. So they switched to noses, smaller, easier to preserve in salt, easier to pack in barrels, easier to ship across the sea to Japan for counting. It did not matter if the victims still lived. It did not matter if they were soldiers or farmers, men or women, elderly or children. A nose was a nose. A tally was a tally. A reward was a reward. This was not war. This was accounting. Then I saw my wife. She was kneeling beside my father in the square. Her hands were bound behind her back. 3 soldiers surrounded her. She did not struggle. She did not scream. She looked up at the mountains, looked directly at where I was hiding, and I swear on my ancestors, she saw me. Our eyes met across the distance. She nodded once. Just once. Giving me permission to save our children. Telling me not to come down, not to die uselessly, not to make her sacrifice meaningless. I understood, but understanding did not make it bearable. Then the knife flashed, and my wife's face became a mask of blood. The soldier worked quickly, professionally. My father beside her suffered the same fate. Both were still alive when the soldiers moved on to the next villagers. Left there, kneeling, bleeding, mutilated, to die slowly or survive as living reminders of Japanese mercy. I put my hand over my son's eyes, but I could not close my own. I owed her that much, to witness, to remember, to tell. My daughter was screaming into my chest, but no sound came out. My son's body shook with silent sobs. I held them both and watched my wife bleed and could do nothing. Nothing. What kind of man was I? What kind of husband? What kind of son? A coward. That's what kind. A coward who saved himself and his children while his wife and father died in agony below. The collection continued for 3 hours. 3 hours. The soldiers took breaks, drank water, ate rice balls, chatted with each other. Casual, relaxed. This was just another day's work. The wicker baskets filled. When one was full, it was carried to an ox cart and a new basket was started. I counted 14 baskets by the time they finished. 14 baskets of noses from my village. In our village of 340 souls, 287 had their noses taken that day. I learned the exact number later because the Japanese kept meticulous records. Everything was recorded. Everything was counted. Everything was logged in ledgers that still exist in Japanese archives today. Of those 287, 112 died from bleeding or infection within a week. 175 survived, if you can call it survival, faceless, unable to breathe properly through the holes where their noses had been, unable to speak clearly, unable to eat without difficulty, marked forever, shunned even by other Koreans who could not bear to look at them. The Japanese soldiers loaded their 14 barrels of noses onto ox carts and moved to the next village. I watched them go. Still, I did not move. Not until they were gone over the horizon. Not until the screaming stopped. Not until the only sound was the wind and the crying of the survivors below. When I finally came down from the mountain, my wife was dead. She had bled out hours before. My father lay beside her, also dead. The mercy of unconsciousness had taken them both. I buried them on the hillside where I had hidden, where I had watched, where I had done nothing. I did not go back to the village square. I could not bear to see what else lay there. Who else lay there? How many children? How many friends? How many neighbors who had shared our festivals and our sorrows for generations? I took my son and daughter, and we fled north. For 3 months, we hid in the mountains, eating roots and tree bark, drinking from streams, moving only at night. We saw the same horror in every valley we passed. Burned villages, mutilated survivors with white cloth wrapped around their faces, barrels of noses on wagons, heading south to the ships that would carry them to Japan. My daughter stopped speaking. She has not spoken a word in 18 years. My son's eyes became dead, hollow. He became a Buddhist monk, seeking peace his soul cannot find. The war ended in 1598, when Hideyoshi died and his army withdrew. But the scars did not end. Korea was devastated. Over 1 million dead. Hundreds of thousands more taken as slaves to Japan. Entire regions depopulated. Centuries of art and culture destroyed. Books burned. Temples razed. The printing press that had existed 200 years before Gutenberg destroyed. And everywhere, survivors without noses. They wore white cloth masks. Some carved wooden noses and tied them on with string. Most simply hid indoors, ashamed of their appearance, bitter that they had survived at all. I learned later the full scope of the atrocity. Over the 7 years of war, more than 200,000 Korean noses were collected, preserved, and shipped to Japan. 200,000. Each one carefully salted, packed in barrels, transported across the sea, counted and recorded in ledgers. In Kyoto, they built a monument to bury them. The Mimizuka, they called it. The ear mound, though it was filled with noses, not ears. A mound 30 feet high, 50 feet across. 38,000 noses in a single burial site. The rest were scattered in other mounds across Japan, or kept as trophies by individual samurai families. The Mimizuka still stands today. You can visit it if you go to Kyoto. It's near the Toyokuni Shrine, surrounded by a peaceful garden. The inscription says the noses were buried there to console the spirits of the dead. But you cannot console the dead by making monuments from their stolen flesh. You cannot honor victims by celebrating their mutilation. I write this now in the year 1615, 18 years after that morning in Namwon. I am 53 years old. I look like I am 80. My hair is white. My hands shake. I sleep 2 hours a night if I am lucky. The rest of the time, I see her face. I hear the screaming. I smell the blood. My children are grown. My son lives in a mountain monastery, praying for forgiveness for sins he did not commit. My daughter married a kind man who does not mind that she cannot speak. She bears no children. She says she will not bring life into a world capable of such cruelty. I never remarried. How could I? Every woman I see, I imagine my Sion he. Every face I see, I imagine it without a nose. Every market vendor, every neighbor, every stranger on the road. I see them as they were, and as they could become with one flash of a knife. I have tried to find where my wife's nose is buried. Is it in the Mimizuka in Kyoto? Is it in another mound? Was it kept as a trophy by the soldier who cut it? I will never know. The Japanese records are meticulous about quantities, but not about individuals. She is just a number in a ledger. Entry number 1247 on some accountant's list. That is what they reduced her to. A number, a tally mark. One more nose in the quota. I learned something during those 7 years of hell that the Japanese called Bunroku and Keiko no Iki, the Bunroku and Keiko campaigns. Just another war to them. Just another attempted conquest. Just another line in their history books. I learned that the greatest evil is not committed in rage or passion. It is committed calmly, methodically, with record-keeping and efficiency. The Japanese soldiers who took my wife's nose were not monsters. They were not demons. They were men following orders. Men doing their jobs. Men trying to meet their quotas so they could get paid and feed their own families. That is what terrifies me most. Not that humans can be cruel, but that cruelty can be bureaucratized, systemized, rewarded, turned into policy, recorded in ledgers, made routine. My wife died with her face cut open and her nose in a wicker basket, all so a soldier could collect his payment and his lord could count his victories. The Mimizuka monument has an inscription in Japanese. I have been told it says the noses were buried there to console the spirits and pray for peace. How generous. How merciful. They mutilate 200,000 Koreans and then pray for their souls. They destroy our faces and then ask Buddha to forgive them. But you cannot console the dead with monuments built from their stolen flesh. You cannot pray away genocide. You cannot honor victims by making tourist attractions from their remains. Japanese school children visit the Mimizuka on field trips now, I am told. Some feel shame. Most feel nothing. It is just another old monument in an old city. Another historical site to check off a list. But it is not history to me. It is not the past. It is yesterday. It is this morning. It is every moment of every day. The grass grows over the Mimizuka now. Beautiful green grass, carefully maintained, peaceful and serene. But I know what feeds that grass. I know what lies beneath. 38,000 noses. 38,000 faces destroyed. 38,000 families shattered. Just in that one mound. My wife's nose is in there somewhere. Or in another mound. Or lost forever. I will never know. All I know is that she died for a number in a ledger. She died so a soldier could meet his quota. She died because cruelty became policy and atrocity became routine. That is not war. That is not honor. That is not glory. That is simply evil with excellent record keeping. Statistics. Korean casualties during Imjin War. 1,592 to 1598. 1 million dead Koreans enslaved and taken to Japan. 50,000 to 200,000. Villages destroyed. Thousands noses collected and shipped to Japan. 200,000 plus noses buried in Kyoto's Mimizuka monument. 38,000. Average time to mutilate an entire village. 2 to 4 hours years the war lasted. 7. The Mimizuka monument still stands in Kyoto today, near the Toyokuni Shrine. Japanese history textbooks devote an average of 2 to 3 sentences to the nose collection practice. The ledgers recording the nose counts still exist in Japanese archives. Korean survivors and their descendants were still identifiable by facial scars into the 1800s. The monument was declared a historic site by the Japanese government in 1969.